Do you think there are different challenges that are faced by mothers and by fathers following the death of a child?
I mean, I think they are different. I think how I see it is that grief is often one of the images for grief is an iceberg, and the third that you see on top is what people show and what they say and what they look like. And the two-thirds of the grief below the waterline of an iceberg is what you don't see. And I think the levels of pain that men and women feel are the same, very much the same, the intensity of the loss, the pain of it. I think the research shows, and certainly my experience backs it up, is that men and women tend to grieve differently. So from the strawberry and shoot dual process, men tend to be restorative. They tend to want to get on with life. Women tend to be loss oriented. So the dual process is that the process of grieving is that at the moment of the death, you have two instinctive responses: to be loss oriented and to be restoration oriented, and that you oscillate between the two. And you need to move between the other, so that by being restorative and a break from the grief gives you the emotional energy to go back and do some of the loss work and face the reality of the death. Women tend to be loss oriented and ruminate and go over the death, and men tend to be restorative. They may want another child quicker than the woman. And that different way of grieving can cause conflict in the couple. And so I often tell them about the dual process, and that is very helpful for them, because then they understand that he's not being like this insensitive person, and she isn't this kind of wet rag. And I encourage them to find ways to help each other, to do a bit of the other, so he can help her have some hope for the future, and she can help him have a focus for their grief. And sort of understanding that given how abnormal this process is, that what they're feeling is normal, I think is important. My other thing about couples is I think really you need support as a couple. So when I was at St. Mary's, I always encouraged the couples to come. Often the women presented themselves and wanted support, but I would encourage them to include their husbands or partners, because it's a systemic family massive loss, and the whole system needs recalibration. So you need to find ways of processing that and aligning with each other through that if you're going to rebuild.
So you give the impression that, you have the pain of the death of the child, but also that some of the problems come from the differences in the way that the parents grieve and perhaps misinterpret, what they see as, not grieving or not feeling enough as just being a kind of different mode of grief and a lack of communication. Would you say that's
I think
a
that
central issue?
I think because your capacity to tolerate each other's differences is diminished when you're grieving. So you kind of want people to be the same as you, or you want to feel that what you're feeling is normal. So when you see your partner doing it differently, it can feel wrong. And so I agree that it's to allow difference and not to criticize it. And if in the relationship there were pre-existing fault lines, those fault lines are likely to kind of rupture. I mean, one of the things that I heard many times from clients was that they were told they were very likely to break up if a child died. And I thought that was incredibly unhelpful to tell people. I mean, I would say the reverse is that in some senses, only these two people can really know what this experience is like. And so there's something about that, as agonizing and terrible as it is, that you share something that no one can ever understand in the same way as you. And that finding a way of grieving and supporting each other together is your best way forward.